Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this virtual professional development opportunity hosted by the Maine Department of Education. My name is Joe Schmidt, and I'm the Social Studies Specialist for the state. Today, we are welcoming Jill Bass and Mia Salamoni from the Mikva Challenge. They're here to talk about the Soapbox Challenge and some of the other programs that Mikva has to offer. As many of you know, before coming to Maine, I was the Social Studies Curriculum Leader in Madison, Wisconsin, in their public schools. And Mikva is located out of Chicago. And so we got to work with Mikva and some of the work that they're doing. And I can tell you that I did get to see a lot of the videos and pictures of friends and colleagues back in Madison from their Soapbox Challenge earlier this year. And it was very inspiring to see students, young adults, speaking up and being able to have their voices heard. And so that's why I reached out to Brian Brady from Mikva Challenge and asked if he would be willing to help set this up. And he said, absolutely. And he connected me with Jill and Mia. So here we are to learn all about Mikva Challenge and amplifying student voice through the Soapbox Challenge. And so with that all being said, I will turn it over to Jill and Mia.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Mia, are you sharing your screen?
Yeah.
So, hi, everyone. I will start by saying that, well, thanks, Joe, for bringing us. We are based out of Chicago, but we are bringing this work all around the country. And as you can see, as we're going through the slides, and you know this is your life. Probably this whole last 2 months is remote learning. Like Zoom is a little bit, doing professional learning through Zoom is fairly new to us, so be gentle. And also, I bet you wish that you had a second co-facilitator when you were teaching, because that's a lot to do at the same time. So I am Jill. Mia, you could click to the next slide. And I am the Chief Education Officer at Mikva Challenge. I taught in Chicago and New York City for 13 years. Joined Mikva about 10 years ago, yikes. My Muppet persona is probably one of these guys. I don't know how many folks are in my age bracket that are big Muppet fans, but the two cranky old guys that hung out in the balcony. If I were a Muppet, that's who I would be.
I'm Mia Salamoni. I'm the National Program Manager at Mikva Challenge. I've been with Mikva about 6 years now. And my Muppet persona is Scooter. He's like the backstage manager of the Muppets show, and that kind of resonates with me in terms of my role here at Mikva. I do a lot on the back end to make sure the show goes well.
That was a good choice, Mia. She wasn't even sure. And the first time I saw that was today. So if everyone could just introduce yourself in the chat, your name, what you teach, or like your name, what do you do, and Muppet is optional. But if you were a Muppet, who would you be? We'll make that one optional because some people might want more time to think about that. Mine was kind of easy. And also, I think sometimes we are more than one Muppet, so that's okay too. And while folks are introducing themselves, Mia, do you want to introduce our organization? Because we have this kind of strange name that might not carry so well outside of Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mikva Challenge, it's a little unusual. But we're actually named after people. We're named after Abner and Zoe Mikva. And we're really honored to carry on their legacy. They're two awesome folks who spent their life strengthening our democracy. Ab was a politician. He was a congressman. He was a judge. He was White House counsel to the president. And Zoe was an educator and a lobbyist, and really just dedicated her life to improving her community. So totally honored to carry on their legacy, and that's where our name comes from, the Mikva Challenge. And so this is our, or maybe we can quickly look over and just see where folks are coming from in the chat. You all can see that too if you scroll to the bottom and click on the chat. You can see where everyone's coming from. around Maine. That's exciting. Okay.
We've got 2 Swedish chefs, which it's funny because every single one that people are saying, I'm like, that's my favorite. But they're all my favorite.
I got deep into a internet hole looking at different Muppets. Anyways, this is our mission statement. So we develop youth to be empowered, informed, active citizens who will promote a just and equitable society. This is rooted in a belief that youth voice and youth participation matter, and our communities are stronger when young folks are participating and involved in shaping their own destiny. So we're a nonprofit, we're nonpartisan, which means that we make space for young people to form their own opinions and choose their candidates and the issues that they want to support. We call this work Action Civics, which is rooted in 4 main values: youth expertise, so this idea that young people are experts on the issues that impact them; youth voice, we should be listening to young people, to what they have to say, we should be lifting up their voices and giving them a platform; learning by doing, this idea that the best way to learn about our democracy is by participating in it; and then reflection, so learning from all these experiences. And Action Civics is about helping young people take informed, powerful action on the issues that matter to them. At Mikva, we believe that youth are not apathetic, they're just uninvited. So it's our job as adults and as educators to bring them to the table, to bring them into the conversation.
Yeah, they're definitely not apathetic. And we are having kind of a soapbox moment around the world right now. We see protests happening. This one happens to be in London. And it's an example of how the power of words and citizens speaking up can actually influence policy, as we're seeing in some cities that are changing some of their policies. So I can't think of a more appropriate time to be having this conversation. And I think as teachers, a question to ask, and for the, so I don't even want to, I don't know if everybody is a social studies teacher specifically, but I would say all teachers are civics teachers. If teaching civics is like how to get along in our society with others and work towards the common good, then, you know, collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, all of that belongs in every subject area. And so as teachers, I think the question of how are we preparing our students to become empowered, active, and engaged small c citizens. Okay, so then click. Mia's got the controls here, so I have to. I mean, we do see young people. These are just really a handful of headlines that are happening right now of students leading movements around the country. And this is not new to us. We see this all the time, okay? There's lots of things young people could be doing, but we think really to be an active, engaged, empowered citizen, the first step is figuring out what you are passionate about, taking a stand, and then being able to speak out on this. So that is our Project Soapbox. That is, we run many programs. We're really just talking about Soapbox today, but for us, Project Soapbox is where you take we're helping students find their voices in that way and then amplifying them. So what is Soapbox? Mia, you can click to the next one. I mean, it's really the simple question of if you could change one thing in your community, what would it be? We ask students to think about that and develop a short speech to compel their audience to care about that issue. And so let's just take a minute to think about that for ourselves. And you can use the chat. If this is the I always think it's really important for us as educators to walk in the shoes of what we ask our students to do. So we ask our students this question: if you could change one thing in your community, what would it be? If you're like me, there's a lot. I would get on my soapbox about a lot of things, so choose one. And for today, just because the way the world is and some recommendations our students made last week, I will say social emotional learning is something I would get on my soapbox for. Really centering that in schools. So use the chat, share what you're feeling right now would be your soapbox, with the understanding that tomorrow or in 10 minutes, your soapbox might be something different. I'll give people just a minute to think and then type. These are great. And also a good reminder that we have a lot of work cut out for us as a society. And so doing this work of action civics with our students is really important. Cindy, it's not just your district. It's kind of a big problem everywhere. Yeah, mental health, emotional health is a really popular topic with our students. If we look at all our Project Soapbox speeches, I don't know, something like, I'm going to guess 75% in some way, shape, or form relate to a mental health issue. Yeah, so I'm hearing a lot of mental health, social emotional learning, race, access to services, civic participation. These are food insecurity. These are the same topics we hear our students talk about a lot of the time. So know that. So we want to start with what do you care about? But you can't just jump into things that, like, creating the container for learning is really important. And so we talk about creating a democratic classroom. And Soapbox can be a way to build that democratic classroom, but there's also some things that help make the Soapbox experience more powerful. So we talk about building community and developing empathy. We talk about engaging in courageous conversations. So I was in a classroom where a student's soapbox speech was about homophobia, and she came out to her classmates. That would not have happened if the teacher hadn't created the environment for that to happen. And the students, the rest of the class, was so blown away by her speech, they chose homophobia as their issue to work on because they felt like they had a lot to learn. They were like, we had no idea, and they wanted to learn more. So creating a democratic classroom is creating that context. And so that's a whole other workshop that we lead, is how to create that democratic classroom. But for today, Mia and I were talking about, one of the most essential things we always do is set some norms for the class. So, with students or in the space. So thinking about, we're not really engaging in conversation is pretty short in an hour on Zoom. But so for our time together, we ask people to be present. I know that's hard when you're working from home. Like I said earlier, my daughter might walk through here. You might see her in her pajamas. Ask clarifying questions. So feel free to go off mute or use the chat to ask questions as we go. We'll keep Mike's muted, except when talking. And if you want, if possible, it's nice to see faces, but that's not always possible. Use the chat and ask questions, and then stay curious. And Mia, if you'll flip back to the previous slide, I'm just curious. I know folks are probably doing their own practices already in their classrooms to help build this kind of environment for learning. Can you just use the chat to, or if somebody wants to go off mute and share, what are some practices you do in your classroom already or with your students already to build community and empathy, to engage in courageous conversations, to build critical analysis or have students engage in action research? You know, it does not need to be a long explanation, but are there ways that you are intentional to build that environment so that students feel comfortable to share, to speak, to maybe ask a question that, or present a position that is not going to be what everybody else in the class thinks, to have the courage to say something? So if somebody wanted to go off mute, they could. Otherwise, we can use the chat for that. I love family meetings, restorative practices, morning meetings. I think something, I'm a high school and middle school teacher, and I've had the opportunity to work with elementary school teachers the last few years. And I feel like high school teachers could learn so much about social emotional learning from elementary school teachers and the way that they structure their classroom, building empathy. Ooh, family style lunches, I love that. I think when you break bread together, that's a different situation. Margaret, I hope you bring your kindergarten practices to your alternative high school.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every day.
The idea of if you make a mistake, it's a learning experience. One of my own children, math teacher, the back bulletin board was called Beautiful Mistakes. And it was the idea that it is not something to be ashamed of, but we all can learn from. Sometimes with math, it was divergent thinking, right? But just, it's never a mistake if you learn something from that. Yeah, I think, Tammy, like the environment that is safe, having a meal together. I think sometimes teachers forget, like, being a human to your students is really a great thing. Just to not always be like, you know, work, but you can have a relationship beyond that. And it's fortifying for you as a teacher too. I'm hearing a lot of family meetings, and that makes me feel so good. I love that. So people can keep putting ideas, and I hope you're like learning is facilitate. Like a lot of times we just think we get good people together and ask good questions and they learn from each other. So this is also, it's not all about me and Mia. So hopefully this is useful to you, and feel free to ask each other like, hey, what is that all about? But we will move on to Soapbox because I know that's what we're here for.
Yeah, so yeah, let's dive in and talk Soapbox. So every speech has 4 main components, and of course we totally encourage students to get creative and make it their own, and Jill will talk a little bit more about that later, but every speech has these 4 components that lend it structure, and there's a worksheet in the curriculum that will help students kind of parse this out. So these 4 pieces are: define the issue. So today I'm going to talk to you about XYZ, the environment, racism, etc. The reason this is such a big issue is because XYZ. And then describe a vision. So the speaker asks their audience to imagine a world where this issue has been addressed, kind of coming at this big issue from a place of possibility of imagining we can tackle this and we can really make a change. And then explain the assets. So what tools, what do we already have that's working that we can leverage to address this issue? And it could be as simple as, hey, we have 25 kids in our classroom. If we all speak out against bullying and tell 5 friends to do the same, we can change the culture of our school. So again, coming at it from this asset-based approach, this place of possibility, we have what we need. We can make this change. And then finally, a call to action. So something concrete that the speaker will ask their audience to do. These speeches are just the beginning, right? We're just calling out an issue that we want to see addressed, and we want to have our students ask their audience to take a next step. And then what makes a good speech? So we've been doing Project Soapbox for almost 9-10 years now. So we have this awesome archive of all kinds of past speeches that students have given. And in the curriculum, you'll find links to those. You can also, they're always posted on our Facebook page, on our YouTube, because all around the country, young people are getting on their soapbox. So you can watch these videos with your students and have them start to identify what's really working well in this speech, what's maybe not working so well, what's the issue that they've identified, why is it important, what's their call to action, kind of pulling apart these components that make up a really great speech. And also I think just watching these videos is a great example of all the different topics that are out there and the different ways excellent speeches can look. Our tag feedback forms. So as students are watching these videos or as they're giving each other feedback, this form gives them some structure to make sure that their feedback is supportive and constructive. And so we break feedback down into 3 sections. T, tell the speaker something they did well. A, ask a question. G, give the speaker a suggestion for how they might improve their speech. So in just a second, I'm going to play this video. This is a speech a 8th grader in Chicago gave this fall. Her name is Hyacinth. And as you're watching this speech, like Jill was talking about, just because we want to kind of practice what our students are doing and walk in their shoes, be thinking about what your tag feedback would be for Hyacinth.
And we're going to hope that this plays.
Yes, please let us know in the chat if the audio is wonky and we've got a backup.
We have all heard of incidences where a person hears another person speak in a foreign language, and that person proceeds to tell them, speak English or get out, or we speak English here, just because it's America. My name is Hyacinth Calloway, and I'm a child of an immigrant. My mom is Filipino and is born in the Philippines. Before she came here in 2002, she already spoke pretty decent English, but what really helped her to adapt and get better at speaking English was being surrounded supportive people. When I was born, my mom raised me like any other kid, but she made sure that I was raised up with her culture and didn't forget that I was also Filipino. I love living in America, but I especially love to express the other culture I was born with. However, that's hard to do because of incidents like these. On September 25th, 2019, a McDonald's customer in Savannah, Georgia, told a young Latina to speak English and even claimed that her parents came to America and made it a horrible place. Another incident where a JCPenney shopper went off on 2 Latina women, telling them to go back where they belong and saying, speak English, you're in America. If you don't know it, learn it. People feel discouraged to speak their native tongue in public because they're afraid to get into situations like these. In 2017, a record of 66.6 million U.S. residents ages 5 and older spoke another language other than English at home. More than 44.5 million immigrants reside in the United States. 1 in 7 U.S. residents is foreign-born, and immigrants are 13.7% of the overall U.S. population. America was supposed to be a freedom place where people felt safe to speak their mind and to speak in whatever language they choose. People shouldn't feel put down for speaking their native tongue in public. America should be a place full of diversity and acceptance, where we can embrace each other's differences and different cultures. There is no simple solution, and there will never be one. But something that we can do right now is to be open-minded. When you hear another person speak in a different language, ask them about it. Ask where they came from, or just try to make them feel accepted, comfortable, wanted. And by doing this, we can fulfill the American promise to be the land of the free. We need to change so people like me can feel encouraged to express our culture and share it with the rest of America. Ipinagmamalaki ko na ako ay Filipina and Americana. Salamat and minmahal ko kayong lahat. This translates to, I'm proud to be a Filipino and an American. Thank you, and I love you all.
So Hyacinth is awesome. I love watching that speech. And now, I just want you all to take a second and drop in the chat. Maybe just choose one of these tag feedback sections. So either tell Hyacinth something she did well, ask her a question, give her a suggestion for how she might improve her speech. Put it in the chat just to practice using this feedback structure.
And if somebody wanted to go off mic off mute, and if you're like, I don't feel like typing, and you want to say it instead, we're here for that. Yeah, so I'm hearing a lot of passion. I mean, this is the truth. When you ask students what do they care about, you don't have to work hard to get them to be passionate about it. And I think what our job, which is an appropriate job as a teacher, is helping them be effective, right? So you have this passion. How do you tell your message in a way that people hear you? To Cindy's point, it's like one long sentence because I think when you get up there to speak, I know I'm like this. I hate public speaking, and everybody just naturally talks faster when they're speaking. So that's where the practice is really important.
And just for some context there, she's on stage and there's probably a room of 200 people that she's looking out on. So that added to the nerves a little bit too, I think.
I think Stacy's point is important, that it's powerful because it's personal. So she uses that rhetorical device of telling her own personal narrative, but also then connecting it to evidence, other examples around the country. So that's really important. I think sometimes when we'll get the question, well, what do you do with students who say, I don't care about anything? You say that's not true, because they do care about things. They just don't always know that what they care about is something that they're allowed to care about for school. So when they're reflecting on personal experience, and I would say, Mia, correct me if this is wrong, like, I won't make up a percentage, but the overwhelming majority of students have a personal connection to their topics. Now, it's not just a this happened to me story. It's not a trauma narrative or something like that. But what they do is make the personal political. They find a way, they see, like, my mom has been struggling with cancer. My issue is more money for cancer research. Or we had a kindergarten student give a speech on organ donation because his uncle was an organ donor. And so, or was a recipient of from an organ. So I think that's a great place to start with, particularly with adolescents, but even younger students, is start with what they already know and then connect it to a larger piece. Yeah, I mean, and I will say, I think speaking in her language, that took courage too. I'm guessing if she's a student who was bullied or made fun of for her ethnicity to, you know, there's a lot of fear. So to be able to feel powerful enough to do that. So if we think about skills, knowledge, dispositions that Hyacinth exhibits, you know, she clearly has, her research is pretty good. She knows how to put together a speech and deliver it, communication skills, and the empowerment, the agency to do so. So real quick, I'm going to talk through a few pieces. So we have, you know, what do you care about, how to structure that speech. There is a piece in the curriculum of how do you enhance your speech. So, you know, to move away from today I am here to talk to you about drug abuse, and more with, let's start with a compelling opener. What's an attention grabber? How are you going to conclude? What's the last thing, the mic drop that you're going to leave your audience with? What kind of ethos, pathos, someone mentioned that, like, what are you going to use to draw in your audience? That's part of the work in the curriculum. Then you can have a beautifully written speech, but then you have to deliver it. And well, let's use the thumbs up, and let's play with all the tools in Zoom. Thumbs up if you love public speaking, and just don't put anything if you don't love it, because we don't have a thumbs down option. Joe loves public speaking. That's good to know. I feel like people think I'm a liar when I say I don't like public speaking, because they're like, oh my God, you present and you're a teacher. Teaching is different than public speaking, right? Public speaking is, I had like shortness of breath. It's hard to talk. And so we need to allow students the opportunity to practice it in a low stakes way and learn and find their voice in delivery. So I was teaching when Bill Clinton was president, and every student that gave a speech did this. And, you know, we're like little Bill Clintons. And that was not their voice. That was Bill Clinton's voice. So we want to expose them to lots of different types of being an effective speaker and help them find their comfort with delivery. And that happens through practice. So if you think about how often in the course of a year do students public speak in your class, and not participate in a discussion, but like get up and give a presentation where they are speaking in front of a group. And I think everybody does it, but I don't know that we all, I know I did not, do it multiple times throughout the year so that students could improve. It was, you had your public speaking unit, and if you didn't do well, poof, but that's over and you don't ever have to do it again. But if we really want students to become effective public speakers, we need to give them low stakes opportunity to practice. So we have a activity we do in the curriculum called Instant Speech Challenge. You put a bunch of silly topics into a hat or a bowl, and each morning or at the beginning of class, you know, maybe you pull you pick two students, volunteers, or not volunteers, because everybody's gonna go. You pick two students randomly, and they go and they pick a topic and they give a 30-second speech about Flamin' Hot Chips, or about Kanye West, or whatever the topic is. I'm definitely showing how long it's been since I've been in the classroom. Like, Kanye West, well, he's not relevant at all anymore. But they give a speech, and it's extemporaneous, but it's just like, don't worry about it being perfect. Just get comfortable listening to speeches or giving a speech. And then we all do it, and we all kind of laugh about certain parts of it. And then it's not so scary. And then by the time you have to actually give your speech, you're used to it because you've done it so many times. I will add that for students who may be another modification that a special ed teacher gave to us, and then an ELL teacher also suggested, is giving the topics the night before. So for students who maybe need a little bit more cognitive time to process, or to give their speeches in another language, is another option, just to put it out there. We talked in the beginning part about empathy. We had two researchers, Molly Andolina and Hillary Conklin, research project Soapbox for 2 years. And they were looking for how does this impacts in terms of students' civic skills, their speaking and listening skills. And yes, great impacts, but I think what was most interesting to us as a result from their research was that students responded about empathy questions and how they really understood their peers and understood issues that they didn't so much understand before from listening to their peers, which I understand is frustrating for us as teachers. Like, I've been trying to get you guys to understand this stuff, but it's different from when they hear it from a peer and they hear about a personal experience from someone who is their age, or you know, I had no idea that this was something that you felt strongly about. You are helping me understand a different side of you, a different side of this issue. And so we don't take the Soapbox experience is not just about, can you get up there and give a speech and whew, you did and you're done. It's listening to each other. And so we work on listening to learn and how to be present and how to think about things like your body language and leaning in and asking clarifying questions and assuming best intent when people are speaking. So that's also wrapped into this whole experience. And so Soapbox, you know, students work on their speeches. They will deliver them in class to each other. If you have multiple classrooms doing Soapbox, they will maybe have a school-wide Soapbox. In many of our cities, like where you saw Hyacinth, that was at a citywide or a district-wide event. But we want students to think beyond the classroom, who else should hear our speech? So if a student is giving a speech on mental health, who are people in your community, in our city, in our town that should hear this? Are there elected officials that would benefit from knowing some of this stuff? And I can give countless examples of when we've had elected officials say, oh my God, I had no idea, from things that students said. One group of students were doing something about, well, lunchroom food, which I will tell you is a universal plague across the country. And their issue was that milk was the only beverage, or one of the issues was that milk was the only beverage served, and many African-American students were lactose intolerant. And they wound up presenting this to the head of schools in Chicago. And she had no idea that that was the only, you can't get water, that's not an option. No, milk is the only option. So sometimes it's just like, it's a raising awareness issue to be able to bring the student experience to a person who is in a decision-making position. But we want students to think outside of the classroom walls and think about who else should be hearing their speeches. So you'll see in the next slide, these are students from outside of Atlanta, Georgia. They presented their speeches after they had done them in class to a town council meeting to raise some of these issues to their elected officials. And I believe these look like they're about sixth or seventh graders. And Mia, I think I stepped on your next slide by giving some of it away, sorry.
The surprise has been revealed. So there's lots of levels that you can do Soapbox at. You know, if you just do it in your classroom this year, fabulous. But also, if there's a bunch of teachers in your school that are all doing Soapbox, it can be really powerful to take it to the next level and have a school-wide showcase. Have a couple of students represent each classroom and get on stage in front of the school. And then, like Jill was mentioning, you saw Hyacinth was on stage in front of 200 people from all over Chicago. That was at a citywide event, which is something, I think right now there's about 15 citywide events that happened this past school year around the country. And that's something that Mikva staff can help support too. And then the kind of The ultimate final level is Soapbox Nation, and that's where students record themselves giving their soapbox speech, send it to us, and we share that out on our social media, so to give them a really huge platform to reach lots of folks with their message. There's usually prizes involved too. It's very fun. And of course, you can pick and choose. You might do it in your classroom, that's great, and then have students submit to Soapbox Nation, or go straight from classroom to citywide. So lots of ways to mix and match. And speaking of the Chicago citywide competition, we just want to show this video to give you kind of a taste of the magic and the energy of giving young people this platform to make their voice heard. So again, I'm going to go ahead and click play, but if something with the tech gets wonky, put it in the chat and we'll use our backup option.
You might need to scroll it back a bit. I don't know. We might not be at the very beginning.
Okay, let's see.
Question: the fake news about climate change.
Cyberbullying is an aggressive intention and act.
These are the true victims of deportation.
Politicians say be tough on crime, but does that really help?
Project Soapbox allows kids to speak out about their ideas on the world, what they think needs to be fixed in their community.
My call is to you, all the humans on this earth.
I've always been interested in getting my voice out there, being heard, and before Project Soapbox, before this, I never really had an opportunity to.
I ask that you challenge bigotry, homophobia, and transphobia.
If you came here today, you'd see that so many people are engaged and want to see something happen in their communities and want to be that change.
Project Soapbox is part of our Issues to Action curriculum. It's how we get students to sort of dip their toe into civics. It's a mashup of issues, public speaking, call to action.
Sexuality is no longer cookie cutter, so why is sex ed still exactly that?
If you don't advance, you still get the experience to hear other people's stories as well as share your own stories.
If you know a young man that's going on a negative road, give them help. All words help.
My topic is young men without fathers in their lives.
My topic was climate change.
The topic I chose was suicide.
My speech was on sexual assault,
sex education,
police brutality,
cyberbullying,
illegal immigrants,
incarceration,
LGBTQ, sexual abuse, climate change.
We have over 200 students who arrived here at 8:30 this morning. They came from over 60 public middle school and high schools in Chicago.
They get assigned a semifinal room where they'll get to present in a room of about 20 students.
What we've noticed is that our Project Soapbox actually raises the empathy level of students because they're getting to know each other, getting to know the issues that other people care about.
Of each of the 10 classrooms where we have student speakers, one from each classroom gets to go to the finals.
So when I heard my name being called, I kind of just looked at my dad. I was like, wait, did they say my name?
I heard a lot of clapping, and then I walked up onto the stage and I got a couple high fives.
I was shocked because when I did my presentation for the first time in that group, I had to improv because I forgot what I wrote down on the paper.
I was excited, but I was nervous at the same time.
82% of juvenile victims are like me. It's sad that it's so likely for these things to happen.
If covering up was all a girl had to do, then why is it still 1 in every 6 women that's being affected today? Thank you.
We hope that they leave here with a renewed passion to heal our city. We really believe that we're not only creating leaders, but we're creating youth that are going to go forward and heal the city and really our country right now.
It's not as difficult as you think it is to make other people care about what you care about.
You can do so much. This is very clear proof that you can and you will.
Young people do have a voice and they can change the issues that do affect them.
I would really encourage everybody, get involved, find something you're passionate about.
If you want your voice to be heard,
get on your soapbox.
Get on your soapbox.
Get on
your soapbox. If you have a topic that you're passionate about, get on your soapbox.
Please get on your soapbox.
Join Project Soapbox.
It was so weird because the words were going with the wrong face.
Yeah.
Oh, technology.
Thank you all for your patience. I'm going to really quickly just put the link in the chat, so if you want to check it out later. you can do that without all the lagging. Okay.
And we say 2-minute speeches. That's variable. Nothing we do is written in stone. So if somebody wanted to make it part of a different project that you're already doing and they're longer or shorter, but for our competitions, just because of time, 2 minutes is a good window.
Like lots of things this spring, some of these citywide events that we had planned on hosting did not happen. Of course, lots of things have changed, but we were able to transition them to virtual events. So I want to give you all a taste of what that looks like. What we did, so I'm showing here on the slide are 2 examples from Newcastle County, Delaware. Instead of having everyone gather together in one place, we shared students' speeches on Facebook and then invited members of the community, civic leaders to watch those speeches and to comment and engage with the students about their issues. And of course, we encourage students to engage with their peers as well. So these are 2, I just took some screenshots of 2 of the speeches that were part of that event. And you can see like Liliana used her phone to record herself at home and sent that in to be part of the virtual event. Hakeem looks like he was able to give his speech in his classroom before we transitioned to virtual learning. So we used a video of that to share for this countywide soapbox that we hosted virtually. And in the comments in just a minute, I will share links to, we hosted a virtual event in Delaware. We did one in Detroit and one in Milwaukee this year. So, I know there's still a lot of questions about what next year will look like in schools, and everything that Jill and I have talked about so far can absolutely transition virtually. And we've seen it work. We also adapted our Soapbox curriculum to be digital assignments that students can do during virtual learning, should that be needed. So there's ways to adapt.
Yeah, in fact, in some ways, because it's so student driven, it's there's no like lectures about speeches. It's watch some speeches, give some feedback, a lot of peer-to-peer editing and practicing that can be done in breakout rooms, can be done individually. So, or give your speech to someone in your house and have them fill out this feedback form. So we weren't sure how many folks would actually do it, but we were pleased with how many happened since March. And Project Soapbox is its own thing, but it is also part of a larger issues to action curriculum that we have. So I just wanted to note this. It is step 2, where students identify an issue that they care about. And what the 6-step process takes them to do is take action on something you care about. So if you do Soapbox, and even if you say, all I have time to, it's 10 lessons or something like that. If you're like, all I have time to do is Soapbox, and I think that is a tremendously great place to start. What you will find is, and I'm just giving you fair warning, is that your students are gonna wanna do stuff. They'll be like, this is wrong. Somebody should do something about it. We should do something about it. And so the full issues to action is to take them through understanding what their civic powers are, understanding how to be effective in bringing change. And this moment right now, we see a lot of protests, and we want students to also understand protests are powerful, but they are not. If that is the only tool you have in your toolbox, you're gonna be very limited. We want them to think about other strategies for bringing change along with protests. And issues to action is also a whole other thing that we don't have time to do today, but just know that if your school or district is interested in any of this, particularly now with the world of Zoom, it is easy for us to come to you and provide professional development around those issues. In our last moments, I want to leave time for questions, and I also want to leave you with 2 quotes. So I mentioned the research that was done on the project, and this is straight from their research. It's the first time for many young people to be able to structurally listen to their peers, and for adults to listen to their students about issues that matter to them, that there's a structure for listening. I think we live in a political climate where there's a lot of talking and not a lot of listening. And so this is really resonant to me. And then the second part is about listening too, because the format of speech presentations encourage listening, so students have the opportunity to hear new perspectives and develop a deeper understanding of each other and the issues important to their peers. Again, this is from the research. And I just think in our politically polarized world, this is really key. And then let's end with words from teachers. This is one of the teachers who participated during the study. She said, "It changed my teaching. It made me realize that if you don't listen to students, it's one of the main reasons they don't listen to you. Students have knowledge, and that knowledge can impact change, and it's unique and important. And when they're listened to, they feel taken seriously, and then they take things seriously." I like ending on a teacher voice. So, but this is a good time to ask questions, either again through the chat, or if you want to practice your speaking voice and unmute yourself. And Joe, I don't know if you have anything to add, official.
Nope, I loved your prompt though for the participants to practice their voices.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions for Jill or Mia?
And we did not really model interactive learning, FYI, because we had an hour. So sorry about that.
Hello, first off, thanks to the both of you for all the great work that you're doing and taking the time to speak with us. Speaking in public is incredibly important, but I have some students, or have had students, who struggle with anxiety, and are there ways to acknowledge those and differentiate while still including them in the project?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so we say, you know, Hyacinth is maybe, you know, where we're heading, but we're all about where we're starting too, right? So if students have challenges and anxiety, I think of, we want you to move down a process. And teachers have gotten so creative in making adaptations and modifications for their students. So I mentioned there are some teachers where the students give their speeches in their native language. There are some students who maybe will record their speech at home and just play it, either for the class or just for the teacher, depending. I wish the video was better of this. The sound is not very good, but we have a teacher in Chicago whose student had an IEP. He had severe social anxiety disorder, and it was actually not required for him to give a speech because of his social anxiety disorder. But because she had built such a strong community in that classroom, and the student really wanted to challenge himself, he really did not want to be different than everybody else. He's like, I want to try to do this. And he had tried and tried numerous times and just couldn't and couldn't. And then a student said, would it help if we turn our chairs facing the other way so that you are giving your speech to our backs? First of all, this was after multiple attempts at trying. And the speaker said, well, yeah, let's try that. And he did. And what we didn't talk about was there's a practice called snaps for support. So everybody, if you're struggling, if you're having a tough time. So in this video, again, the sound is not very good, but you see all these students' backs, the student giving his attempt at a speech, and lots of snapping for him. And that was a huge step for him to be able to do that. So yeah, I think you know your students, and I think it's being creative and having them also have some voice in how much challenged by choice, how much they're able to do this. But the idea is also we want to take the heat down from it's this really stressful thing by having their voices in the classroom a lot, so that when you give your speech, it's not that weird, because you're used to talking and hearing other people talk, and someone said, like, mistakes are not punitive. We celebrate and support each other, as like woo woo as that might sound. I'll stand by it. I think it's important. So that's a great question, though.
Other questions for Jill or Mia? Last call. Go ahead, Jill.
Mia, will you just, because we took the slides down, will you put the link to the curriculum in the chat? And you have our emails as well. And I will share this deck with Joe so he can send it out to folks as well. And just, feel free to reach out to either of us directly to follow up if this is something you think you'd be interested in doing, because we are definitely going to do a national virtual Soapbox next year, so your students could participate in that as well.
So I have a question. I work with third grade, and I've noticed that some of them have like the biggest voices and the loudest opinions about everything and anything. So how would you use this for the littles?
I mean, is your concern that they're not always thoughtful about other people's feelings, or?
Some of them are, and others, I guess, maybe not really thoughtful about. Sometimes they can be. But just how would you gear this for elementary?
And we can also share some speeches from the littles. And it's funny, our New York director was just in third to fifth grade Soapbox yesterday, and then a middle school Soapbox. And she said, there's so much more anxiety for the middle schoolers. And I actually think the middle schoolers are way better than the high school, like in terms of that anxiety, because it's like there's just more self-consciousness as you get older, which is a good and a bad thing. So she said the third to fifth graders were all about saying what they think, and they had opinions and ideas. I think the role for the teacher, and I am no expert about that age group, but is to like make sure we're being thoughtful about considering different opinions and not just shoving our ideas down other people's throats, and then working on the listening. But we can share lots of examples of the younger students, and you can see, and it's also good for your students to see students their age giving speeches. Mia, I don't know if you can think off the top of your head, and I actually don't know if your sound is still working, so maybe your chat, some topics that the younger students have. I mean, I know there was my favorite from Cobb County, Georgia was the importance of napping at school, which I was like, I'm in, let's do it. But she had like a 4 points of evidence of why, like when students are tired, they can't learn well. They won't stay after for other activities because they're too tired. I don't remember her whole speech, but it was pretty thorough.
I'm remembering there was a couple on bullying that stand out to me, and some on the environment, like picking up after yourself, littering, taking care of our world.
Yeah.
The organ donor one comes to mind as well.
I also think it's definitely true for all grade levels, but maybe a little bit more with elementary, is you will hear your voice in your student speeches. So the things that you teach them, sometimes, like, it's just, you're very powerful as teachers. I hope you know that. We had a teacher who did a unit in her social studies class about period equity, menstrual discrimination. I don't know what it's actually called, but in schools. And that was the project the students wanted to work on. So I'm just thinking of that with bullying, like a lot of the topics that students choose. I remember teachers saying, like, we talk about that in class. So
I also want to flag, Cindy, I think you had a good question. How would you include a non-English soapbox into the classroom? And we've seen this done a couple of ways. Recently, actually, the soapbox in New York that Jill was mentioning, there was a Spanish class that wanted to do their soapboxes. And so I believe their solution was to translate it in written format for the students and the judges who don't speak Spanish so that they can still understand what the speech was talking about, but let the student give it in their first language.
And I think Eric Peterson in California, he has students pair. So a native English speaker and a native Spanish speaker, and they will give this, they'll work on developing a speech together and give it in both languages. So it's time, and it's almost summer, so you guys should go out and live your lives. So, but we are locked in our home, so you can email us anytime because we will respond. But we would love, we're actually starting a project. This is going to sound like such a Midwest. I'm originally from New York, but like in New Hampshire, really close by to Maine, right? But we would love to be in Maine. If there are folks that want to engage in this, just let us know. And we will send links both to the PowerPoint, but also I think to some of the, Jen, to some of the elementary school speeches and some of the virtual soapboxes, so you can see what those look like. And just give yourself time, because you might lose yourself into like 2 hours later, be like, I just couldn't stop watching student speeches. It's pretty compelling. All right, Joe, you get the last word.
I should say last call on any official questions for Jill or Mia. Then I will give our official thank you, Jill and Mia, for spending an hour sharing your resources, your time, your expertise, and your passion with Maine educators.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for showing up.
Yes, thank you.